Welcome to the Scale Tech and AI Growth Lab podcast. I'm your host, Jay Farr at Tech Fusion Systems. Our guest is Park Howell at the Business of Story. Park, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jay, thanks so much for having me here.
My pleasure. Do you want to kick us off? Let us know a little bit about the Business of Story and what it's all about.
Absolutely. So you've been there, haven't you, where you sat in a presentation and there's a leader or maybe an author or someone you were really eager to hear, and they went blah, 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 boring, and you left there crushed. You're like, oh my God, what happened there? I teach people how to make sure that doesn't happen to them when they are on stage at the Business of Story. So I teach 3 proven story frameworks that anybody can use anywhere in all of their communication, literally from email writing to landing pages to all social posts to when you are standing on that stage in front of 5,000 people and you want to own that room. That's what I do here at the Business of Story.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Been in the marketing space for a long time. We do a lot of funnels and landing pages and VSLs and webinars, and so it's the story component of selling is such an important part, and it's really lacking for a lot of people. I know I'm an engineer at heart, so I'm more technical. I like facts and figures and all that stuff, and I do think that's important too. But there is a something to be said for the story element, right? That kind of humanizes whatever it is that you're selling.
It
And
really
kind
doesn't.
of,
Think about it from your world, Jay. Like you mentioned, are a technologist. So, what's every technologist, every code writer, every website designer's number one priority is user experience. Isn't that right? To make it as easy as possible, as quickly as possible to get through a website, get to that link, click, get to that link, click it, and move on. If you think about storytelling, it's the exact same thing. In fact, I would argue storytelling and the algorithms that go into a proven story structure was the very first technology tool that we Homo sapiens used when we were trying to navigate and survive the savannah. We organized, planned, act in story, but we had to get our tribesmen and women to buy into that story to see what a brighter tomorrow would look like. So it's the same thing as technologists if you're a good storyteller, because you are creating a user interface or a user experience that is spot on. And so your audience within seconds knows what you're talking about, is compelled to listen, to lean in. And then, of course, your goal in all storytelling, you have an agenda like everyone else, and that is to move them to action, to help them see the world the way you see it, and to follow you either through your leadership or your product or service or whatever, to be able to live into that more powerful story.
yeah, I love that. And you make it sound so simple. And I think that we can look at it from a simplistic framework like you just laid out, but a lot of people really are missing that. And the whole customer acquisition pipeline is an experience that escalates, right? You first have to capture their attention and give them a reason to listen, to hear, and learn more. How does how do stories play into that, from all the way from someone not even knowing who you are to them becoming familiar with you and liking and trusting you enough to learn more and then considering purchasing a product or service from you? How do stories fit
Mm-hmm.
into that, and what do you think the best way to use them is?
Yeah. Let's start, because it's a great question, Jay. Let's start with the first 3 mistakes almost every organizational business brand communicator makes. Number one, mistake number one is you, as the brand communicator and your brand or service, are not the center of the story. Your audience always is. What's in it for them? What journey are they on? And how do you help them get what you want? So, mistake number one, your stories are not about you. They're always about your audience. Mistake number 2, your stories are not about your product or service. Nobody actually cares what you make. What they do care about is what you make happen in their life. Paradigm shift number 2 is stop telling stories about what you make and tell stories about the outcomes. Outcomes trump offerings every single time. What is it you make happen in a person's life? And then number 3 is simplicity slash clarity. how can you get there very quickly? And Jay, I studied all of the big story algorithms, if you will, the hero's journey, which depending on who you read is up to 17 different steps. It's very powerful. It is a proven roadmap, but it's complex. It's difficult to understand. I've seen the 15 Beasts of Story, which is another proven Hollywood framework, but it's complicated to pull off. The 5 primal elements of a short story. See, now we're getting shorter and sweeter, is really powerful in an anecdotal way of how you can tell a short story to make your business point for you, to make, to your point, humanize your offering. But where I always like to start is the simplicity of the and, but, therefore. The 3-word ABT Agile Narrative Framework. I have found in almost 20 years of teaching this that all stories begin with truly understanding this ABT framework and then building upon it. And it's simply a setup, problem, resolution dynamic. It is an algorithm from your technology world. And so it begins first by truly understanding what one problem are you solving for on behalf of your audience to get them to lean in. And then what is your solution moving forward is always your call to action. But that's where we like to start, is with the ABT, is to completely simplify your storytelling journey with that. And then you can build on it the stronger you get with your ABTs.
Right, that makes sense. And something I've noticed, and I'd like to hear your thoughts again as far as to like practical application, is whatever your story is about what you make or what you sell and how that helps your audience, there's different versions of it, right? There's like super short versions. Like it depends how they're engaging with you. If they're going to watch a 60-second ad, you don't have much time to get into it very deep, right? If they're going to get on a video sales letter, maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes. If they're going to get on a webinar, maybe it's 40 minutes. If they're going to get on a sales call, maybe it's longer. Do you use the same frameworks for each medium or each sort of engagement, or does it change based on the length of time that you have and which step of the journey the prospect is on?
That's a terrific question. And the answer is very meta. So let's start with the and, but, therefore. Setup, problem, resolution. The ABT works. And let me give you a quick example of it. I was training Home Depot internal sales team, and one of their guys asked me, Park, what's the shortest ABT? And so tongue in cheek, I said, here it is. You communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, tell a story. So what I did right there in under 10 words is used the 3 forces of story of agreement, prediction, and consequence that are limbic, pattern-seeking, problem-solving, decision-making buying brain absolutely loves. So you start with a statement of agreement. Mine was, you communicate and care, right? Yeah, I absolutely do. But bored. Then you have a statement of contradiction. So agreement to contradiction, but you're boring. Therefore, what's the way forward? It's a statement of consequence. Therefore, tell a story. Now, I can take that and I can expand it, because that in and of itself is a fun little parlor trick of there's a story in under 10 words. Setup, problem, resolution, agreement, contradiction, consequence, that again, this limbic subconscious buying brain loves. But let's expand that a little bit now. Jay, you are a technologist, and you know that if you can connect deeply with your audiences on this podcast, then you can convert them into lifelong customers. But Jay, maybe you're not connecting as deeply as you like, because podcasts are driven by, or technology communications is so often driven by logic and reason and data and numbers and code, when what your audience really wants is the emotional context of a story first. Therefore, if you start beginning your questioning or your shows by first strategizing the narrative with the and, but, therefore in mind, what's the one problem you're going to be solving today, then actually open your show with an ABT, you will get your audiences leaning in. And then when you deliver on those promises, that's when you convert them to a lifelong customer. So what I've done, of course, I've taken a very basic ABT. You communicate and care, but bore. And by the way, this is a ubiquitous you. I'm not pointing at you, and I'm not pointing at audiences, anyone watching or listening this. But the point being is I can take that very short setup problem resolution and then expand it into a longer story depending on where I'm going to use it, on a landing page, in an email, in a 20-minute presentation. That helps me set the stage and the focus for what that overall story is going to be. And then to your point, yes, you are going to have varying lengths of narratives depending on how big your presentation is, how long that blog post is. And you're going to also want to be sprinkling ABTs and these little anecdotal stories throughout to make your points for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've noticed a lot of the really big YouTube channels follow a similar framework with their intro and what the audience is going to get throughout the video, and a story narrative of what the problem and resolution might be. So it's interesting. I definitely do notice that with some other marketers too, some of the really big marketers that are converting at amazing numbers with their audience are using a similar framework. Is this the same framework that you recommend using pretty much unanimously across all of your communication channels, or are there other ones to use as well?
Yeah. Now, I've been in the advertising, branding, marketing world for almost 40 years, Jay. And I cut my teeth in the early days of writing TV commercials and radio commercials and the good old fashioned form of advertising. Then, of course, the digital world came in, and we're so bombarded with unbelievable amounts of information, a cacophony of communication, if you will, that the vast majority of it is non-narrative, meaning it's just, and that is boring to our subconscious limbic brain. You throw two or three ands in that setup, you are going to lose them. So that's why, to answer your question, yes, my go-to now is the and, but, and therefore framework. I learned about it just over a decade ago from my now good friend, Dr. Randy Olson. He was a Harvard PhD evolutionary biologist, had a good sense of how the brain worked, but then he also went into USC Film School, graduated, produced 3 documentaries on climate change and global warming, but now has written 9 books teaching scientists and academia how to communicate using what he learned in Hollywood. But his sole focus is on the and, but, therefore. In fact, I call it the DNA of story. You get that framework down, that one and only framework, then everything else will become easier. And I use it everywhere. You can use it everywhere. Again, emails. You got to write emails. It's a great place to practice your and, but, therefore, and you are going to get more engagement and less ghosting because you are feeding that limbic brain messaging exactly the way it wants to receive it to make meaning. Setup, here's what we want. Statement of agreement. Problem, here's what we have to overcome in order to fulfill that shared vision of the future. Therefore, here's the way forward. It's a perfect story loop of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And like I mentioned earlier, it's fantastic on tweets or X's now, whatever you call it, Facebook posts, Instagram, anywhere you need to have that short, concise message that uses the 3 forces of story, landing pages and so forth, and then you can expand on it. But even the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's monomyth, the hero's journey of its 12 to 17 steps, when you overlay the and, but, therefore on it, you will see that it is the same story structure. You've got the ordinary world that introduces you to the character, who then has a call to action from the mentor guide. That's the and, statement of agreement. They dive into Act 2, where the metaphor goes, they go in, they wrestle the dragon, which they physically have to overcome something, but they also mentally have to overcome that internal dragon inside, that naysayer within them. And that's the but section. And then they return home with the boon, as Campbell would say. And that is Act 3, or the therefore section. So you can see this algorithm of and, but, therefore is incorporated in all narrative and storytelling. And that's always why I tell people, begin with that first. The DNA of story are these 3 words. And there are another ABT for you. The ABT is short and sweet, but tricky. There's our problem. Therefore, it takes practice. So a lot of times people look at those 3 words and go, I got this. It's only 3 words, Park, until they start working it. Then they realize they have to practice it over and over every day. And then after about 4 to 6 weeks, it becomes natural to them. But in that process, they will see their engagement go through the roof, no matter where an audience is in the funnels that you talk about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it certainly is a bit of art and a bit of science to write really good converting copy. Obviously, it's something we deal with all the time with customers and internally, whether we're writing it or they're writing it. And so that's a really great and simplistic, like you said, simple from a conceptual level, but it takes a lot of skill to master. Can you explain one more time? You have setup, problem, and resolution, but you call it ABT. What's the and? How is the and of this setup?
How does that work? So here's how you build one. And then if you like, Jay, we can build one for your brand because it's always fun to put the host on the hot seat and I'll just walk you through it and you'll see how powerful it is. So the statement of agreement is you want to do three things in it. You want to introduce your audience, who you are talking to, what is it they want relative to your offering, and why is that important to them? This way, when you write that out and you're talking to them, you are calling them out in particular specifically. You are, the whole idea here, of course, is to build trust. So you're going to say, I know who you are and I know what you want relative to what I'm having to offer. So that demonstrates that you understand them and you know why that's important to them. That demonstrates that you appreciate. You not only understand who they are and what they want, but appreciate why that's important to them. The but, the statement of contradiction, is where you demonstrate your empathy. But you're frustrated, you're concerned, you're losing sleep at night because of this problem. So you're demonstrating, you know what the problem is, you can empathize how it's impacting them emotionally. Therefore, you paint what that brighter picture looks like for them tomorrow when and if they buy into your product or service, into what you do. And that's how you set it up. It's perfect 3-act structure: agreement, contradiction, consequence. Who's your audience? What do they want relative to your offering? And why is that important to them? Act 1, agreement. But why don't they have them? Act 2, contradiction. Therefore, how are you uniquely equipped to help them get it? Act 3, consequence. Brings it all full circle then.
Perfect. That makes perfect sense. I love how you explain that.
You want to try it on your brand? It's fun.
Sure, let's
Let's
do it.
do this. Jay, tell me what is your, now that you basically know what the ABT is, what is your ABT for Tech Fusion Systems, or what is your ABT for this particular podcast?
So I know that there's a lot of small business owners out there that are looking to scale their businesses. And I understand that's very important to them because they've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into building that business for so long. But the problem is they don't know where to turn to because there's so much information overload out there in the tech world, and they're not sure which technologies to implement and how to implement them correctly. Could always expand on this. It
That's
takes
all
a few
right.
revisions, right?
That's all
Um,
right.
Therefore, at Tech Fusion Systems, what we can do is bring clarity and help you decide exactly which technologies you should implement, in which order to implement them in to get the best results as quickly as possible.
Okay. Great start here. So I'm just going to wing this as we go. But what I heard is, and I'm going to ask you and all your audiences here too to do the same thing. I want you to take it out of the general and make it specific, as if one of your customers or one of your listeners or viewers is sitting right across from you, Jay. And I want you to do the pronoun shift of you, meaning you, your audience. That way it really gets your brain as the storyteller to realize you're telling your story from their point of view. You play the important role of mentor guide, of helping them get what they want. And the next thing I'd say is you are about technology, right? And is it basically helping small businesses get their technology, their tech stacks under control, understanding how much or how little they need, how much or how little they need to invest, and then actually how to operate them to make them as efficient as possible? Is that what you do?
It's about helping small businesses scale by leveraging technology efficiently.
Okay. And that's great. That's awesome. When you get down to technology, can you be more specific to me of what you mean? Are you going to teach me how to run Excel spreadsheets better? Or are you going to teach me how to use Microsoft Office better? Are you going to teach me how to use Adobe Premiere to edit videos? What kind of technology are you talking about?
It would mostly be, I'm not sure how to explain that within your framework. So there's the client acquisition part of it, so marketing and sales. But I'm coming from a technology explanation again, not a story.
That's
framework.
okay. That I'm just trying to boil down because the power story rests in the specifics. So
Hmm.
if you are going to help small businesses scale by helping them with their tech stack, is this around the funnel primarily? Is it primarily about client acquisition?
It's mostly two main areas. So it's client acquisition, so it's affordable client acquisition, and then it's also increasing business efficiency to deliver the products and services.
Better client acquisition, and then presumably you dial in this technology, you are going to be serving that new customer even better to keep them around for as a lifelong customer.
True.
Is that kind of the 1-2 punch?
Yeah.
You've got the technology that attracts them in, and then the technology to be able to manage that relationship as efficiently as possible so that you have customers that stay around forever and tell your story to their friends through free word of mouth marketing. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, it increased efficiencies in delivering the products and services. So there's more profit and also a better user experience. So yes.
And the main problem that you are solving for them is what? And you only get one problem. Is it confusion around tech?
It would be the number one problem is scaling. The number one problem is to help them scale.
Scale their business.
Yes.
But they're not scaling via tech because of what? What in the tech world is keeping them from scaling in your tech world?
Lack of knowledge and experience.
To apply technology
To
that's
apply the
actually going to help them?
to apply technology properly to do it. Yes.
Okay, Tech Fusion Systems. Now, do you have a tagline or a campaign theme that you guys use when you're promoting your wares?
Yeah, it depends on what the promotion is, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay,
Again, the
that's all right. I
context you're
didn't know if we
coming
could
from.
incorporate it in. From what little I know, but the specificity that you've given me here, and for all of you listeners and viewers out there, use this in your own small business too. It's hugely powerful. So, number one, I want you to get super focused. I don't want you, and this is you, Jay, speak. And this is, by the way, you, everyone listening, but for Jay, I don't want you to speak in generalities about your audiences. I want you to think in you as that audience.
Mhm.
So, as a small business owner, you have an incredible opportunity to scale your business. And if you could dial in your technology from customer acquisition through customer engagement, then you will be able to not only 10x your growth, but build lifelong customers,
Right.
right? Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But you're not growing as fast as you could right now because your tech stack is a freaking nightmare. And it's not your fault.
Mhm.
You are a business, you are the expert at running your business. We are the experts at making that even more efficient through the technology that we have to offer. So I'm just saying this out loud now. Then I would go to a therefore expand, grow by 10x and build that customer engagement you dearly seek by making it easy with Tech Fusion Systems. For more than how many years have you been in business?
15.
For more than 15 years, we have been providing the tech coaching, consulting, and implementation for brands of all sizes around the world so that they can acquire more customers faster and then be able to increase that user engagement, that customer engagement through the dashboards we provide. I'm just going blah, 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 because I'm getting too long here. But in my brain, I'm sussing this out. I'm identifying my audience. You, as a small business owner, have a tremendous opportunity to scale your business because your product's so good. And so you have a statement of agreement. Said, thanks, Jay. That's cool. And if you could just dial in your technology, then you could 10x your growth faster than you ever imagined. All statement of agreement, all positive, all aspirational, and you get them nodding yes. That's exactly what I want. But you're not growing as quickly as you could because your technology is a nightmare. And guess what? It's not your fault. Therefore, imagine having a simple, profoundly inspired technology stack that enables you to not only attract the customers that you seek, but to make them lifelong evangelists for your brand with us. Tech Fusion Systems. For more than 15 years, we have been helping small businesses just like you have a huge impact in sales by simplifying your technology. Something like that.
Do you want to know what's so crazy is as I've been writing copy and I keep going through revisions and it keeps getting better and better, I've been moving closer and closer to pretty much what you've laid out, but I wasn't quite there yet naturally. But as soon as you went through that, and as soon as the number one thing I noticed is you speak directly to them. That's something I notice in a lot of very successful, some of the world's best converting copywriters too. And yeah, that's interesting. I was a few steps away from that. You saved me a lot of time. I appreciate that. I'm definitely going to implement this kind of into what I already have that I'm working with that's working. It's going to make it a lot better.
See, and you, like everybody else, we are all Homo sapiens storytelling apes, basically. That's what we do. And so intuitively, you get it. Intuitively in the back of your brain, it's, oh, I'm already doing that part. And we all do that. But when we remain intuitive in our communication, we tend to be winging it. Sometimes we hit it out of the ballpark with the perfect story structure. Other times we fall flat on our face. And I try to encourage people, stop winging it and start winning it every time by becoming intentional. So now in your case, Jay, you were already doing this. It already felt, oh, I didn't even know this thing was a thing. But now that you know about the ABT, become intentional in its use every single time. It's a little bit like Wordle meets Sudoku, or is it Sudoku? I can never say that word. So whatever. It is a puzzle, but it's up to you as the storyteller, as the writer, or whatever, to use the ABT as your framework to put that puzzle together and then bring your voice, your creativity to it, and have as much fun with it as you like.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting. I was a few steps away, but getting closer to that. Each revision, I would get a little bit more personal, a little bit more direct, a little bit more story oriented. Because, like I said, I've been an engineer for so long, and we started out with all the tech stuff, and then we realize, of course, not everyone sees things that way. Not everyone responds to just the tech and the figures and the facts. And so I was moving closer and closer. But yeah, I need to go a little further with that. What can you tell us about? I still think that there is a place and an importance for facts and figures still at some point. What do you think about that? When's the right time to sprinkle in the facts and the figures and things like that? And in what order and in what percentages? What are your thoughts on that?
They are very important. Just don't lead with them. Our brain is not wired to make meaning out of facts and figures unless you place them in the context of a story. In fact, Jonathan Haidt, America's foremost social psychologist, says our brains are make meaning out of story. They're story makers, not out of logic and reason. That's how we get our information. So what I like to do is I will start with an ABT to set up the problem. I'll hit them right over the nose with it, right over the head with it, right up top in under 15 seconds to get them leading in. Now, I might throw a number or two in there to help, but I'm really focused on the emotional, oh my God, what do we do about this problem? That's where I want to get my audience. Then I might use a little anecdotal story to illustrate that problem in action. So it's just not my opinion or assertion. I'll set up that problem. Let's use yours, for instance. You are, okay, Jay, you're talking to someone and you're saying, look, you are a small business and you have this amazing opportunity for growth. If you could just get that tech figured out, then you could 10x your growth faster than ever. But it's a nightmare right now for you because tech is so complicated. You don't know what you need and use and what to spend for. Therefore, imagine waking up in the morning and having your whole tech laid out for you. That's what we do here. For instance, let me tell you about Sherry Williamson. I'm just making this up. 2 weeks ago, Sherry called and she has this amazing company in Wisconsin that does only poodle grooming. I'm just making this stuff up. And then she goes on, and she was like the go-to person in her neighborhood, but she wanted to scale her business outside of that because she's bringing in a mobile business. She knew that her funnel wasn't that great. She wasn't really quite sure what technology to use. And after she looked at her book, she realized she was spending like $350 a month on subscriptions that were doing her no good. We came in, we reduced that spend down to $150 a month. She now has 3 primary software that she uses and a whole dashboard that demonstrates the impact on her business. And she's already seeing an uptick in conversions by 4%. And that's just within 2 weeks. That's why, so what I've done is a setup with the ABT, hooking into that limbic brain, getting them leaning in, firing up the theater of the mind so that they can picture a person going through something exactly what they're going through and what their positive outcome was. And then I will bring in the data. And you know what? Here at Tech Fusion Systems, we've been doing this for small businesses for more than 15 years. On average, we save them 70% on their tech SaaS subscription spends, but I can demonstrate where we're helping them grow by 10x. That's when you've used story structure to set it up, a little anecdote to illustrate it in action, and then roll out your data points after it. But you're using emotion to set the context for your data.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks so much for mapping that out. It makes perfect sense when you say it. And it's funny because I've been running a new webinar, and it's coming along really nicely. And I was struggling with that part of it, how to get in the story part, because I knew it was lacking. Because, like I said, I'm an engineer, right? I'm not the best at the story part, but I know it's needed. And so I've been dabbling with it, and that's exactly what it was missing, I think. It's really going to tie it all together. So
well, I
thank you
teach
for
3
that.
frameworks at the Business of Story, the ABT, and we focused on that today because that's the foundation for everything. The 5 primal elements of a short story, which I made up and used on you with that story about the poodle groomer. And then my book with Brand Bewitchery has the 10-step story cycle system in it that you can use for not only brand story strategy development, but you can also use it for your long form communications, presentations, and webinars. And it provides an overall structure based off the hero's journey, but boiled down to just 10 steps that if you follow this and deliver your content in this way, following the 10 steps, it is a proven winner every time. And you're going to be using ABTs and little anecdotal stories throughout it. So you can see how it's very meta and it all nests within each other. The ABT to capture their attention, a little anecdotal story to fire up the theater of the mind and help them feel the tension and ask the way forward. And then the story cycle system for your long form stuff to make sure that you're delivering the right content at the right time on your audience's journey with you.
Makes perfect sense. And how can people get all of this from you? What do we do? What kind of format do you sell this in?
The best thing to do is I've got a short little course. It's under an hour long that teaches you all about the 3 levels of the ABT 101, but therefore the ABT 201, which gets into this if-then clause, the power of the word because, and so forth. And then ABT 301 about the importance of finding your singular narrative. You could take this whole course in under an hour and start using ABTs immediately. And your audience can find it at businessofstory.com / you guessed it, ABT. That's the best place to start. I also have my own podcast I've had for 8 years. Every Monday, I will come out with a new show with a new story artist from around the world, or I am just finishing up a series on Brand Bewitchery, my textbook, where every episode I read 1 chapter of Brand Bewitchery. So Jay, you can think of it as an audiobook delivered via a podcast series. Your people can find that too on businessofstory.com. Just go to the podcast page, and the first episode is episode number 420. That's where the book begins, and then they can listen to it on their own time, over the course of several weeks, and start applying that information right away for their story skills.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's right here, businessofstory.com, right at the top under your main menu under podcasts. So I'm definitely going to tune into that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
And that's it. It takes you through the ABT, the 5 primal elements, and the story cycle system. So you get all 3 frameworks spelled out to you and how you use them. And there's even exercises within the book and on my show that I share with you to go out and apply the learnings immediately in your world.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I would encourage everyone to do that. I'm so glad I found your website as a resource. It's really exciting because I follow a lot of copywriting and a lot of salespeople out there, and this is definitely something that I don't see. It's not that prevalent. I don't see I don't see enough people using this.
A lot of people are told to tell stories, and they're like, tell a story about this and tell a story about that, but they're never really shown how to tell that story. And when they are, it's quite often 8, 10, 12, 15 steps to tell that story. And that's really hard to do if you're a busy organizational person, a small business person, if you don't really have the love for story theory like a lot of us story coaches do, if you're just like, dude, just make it easy. What can I do to start making my messages land right the first time, every time? And that's why I say, just start with the ABT, because you're using story frameworks without having to understand all of the theory. Take my course. It'll give you a little bit more theory, but it's going to show you massive amounts of examples of the ABT in action all around you, all, in pop culture, in advertising, marketing, and content marketing, in the news. Now that you know about it, you're going to start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's also another problem that we deal with a lot with clients is just the initial attraction, just to get people in their funnel and interested initially is a big problem. And so when you're trying to do that, you don't have their attention for very long because they don't know you yet, right? So you need something that's short but effective. And so it sounds like what you're saying is the ABT is a great place to start when you don't have a lot of time.
That's where you hook them. You deliver good ABT in under 15 seconds. You deliver a great ABT on a landing page, in a tweet, in a short Instagram post. It's setup, problem resolution. And you know what? Your audience doesn't even know what you're doing to them, but you are hacking through the noise that we talked about and hooking in to the emotional heart of their brain, that limbic, amygdala, hippocampus. That's what is paying attention. While we think we are in our frontal lobe, it's not. It's our subconscious that's like scanning the world. What's going on? What should I pay attention to? This helps them to pay attention to you. And as I like to say, Jay, you got to understand the magic if you're going to cast the spell. So start with this 3-act structure of and, but, therefore. That's the first magic trick I want to teach you, because it will blow you away about how effective it is.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing all that. That's awesome. I'm definitely hooked. I'm going to be on your site here. I'm going to be learning and listening to your podcast and going through your training and implementing that. And I think it's really going to help a lot. And I encourage everyone to do that as well. Copywriting is tough, right? A lot of people are not good at copywriting, including a lot of copywriters in my experience. So anyone out there who's an entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, doesn't matter. Go to businessofstory.com and learn how to use story to sell. Fantastic.
Yeah. And check out the course, businessofstory.com/ABT. It will revolutionize how you communicate. I promise you, or your money back. It's just that easy.
ABT. Park Howell, the Business of Story, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Any last comments or words or advice you'd like to give to the audience?
Yeah, the last thing, and I'll end with how I end each and every one of my shows, is as you are becoming a more confident and persuasive communicator through storytelling, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make sure that one is epic. Thanks for having me, Jay.